Craftsman channel here on the YouTube, and I want to welcome you back to another video. I've had a number of people that have asked me basically, how do I set up a workshop for building arcade machines and other things too. I'm just going to give you a brief tour of my workshop and show you some of the things you want to keep in mind when you set up a workshop of your own. Okay, I'm going to start out by taking in my Slurry and show you the workshop. I had another video previously, so I wanted to expand this video a little bit to show you a few things. Okay, the one thing to keep in mind when you're building a workshop, the one thing you want to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you have a budget. Now, in my workshop, I mostly use Craftsman tools because I find that for me they do the job pretty well. Your budget on tools can vary greatly depending on what you have. I'm just going to give you an idea of how much it costs to actually set up a workshop because I've had a lot of people ask me questions. Now, what you're going to see, one of the things I highly recommend if you're going to have a workshop, one of the first things is to get yourself a nice drill press. Now, as you can see here, this is basically a 1 horsepower 15-inch drill press I got. Okay, this is basically a Sears Craftsman drill press. I really like the Craftsman tools. I like the fact that they're pretty reliable, and I've had them for a lot of years. And now you can figure the price on a drill press. When I bought these, now I've had these in my workshop probably close to. I'd say probably if not 20 years, close to 20 years. Now, when I bought this drill press right here, I spent about $400 on it. Now, one thing that made this more expensive is this was a Craftsman edition Sears tool. This is actually more expensive, and also you have to remember that because this is on a base where the floor is, this is actually a stand-up model. I don't have to have this mounted on a table. If you can mount your drill press on like a workbench or something like that, the price comes down considerably on a drill press. I basically had the space and everything to set it up in here, so I didn't want to have a workbench. I had the room to have it where it's at now. In addition to that, the thing you want to keep in mind is with the drill press, when you're buying a drill press, what you want to keep in mind is you want to basically know how big the chuck is. That's the part that actually holds the bit on the end. The larger drill presses will be able to hold larger drill bits, and this is going to depend on how big a hole that you're making. You're going to find, my advice on the drill press is when you order a drill press, I would basically get one that's going to take the minimum hole that you're going to do and then basically multiply that by about 4. And that's basically what I did when I bought them. And that pretty much handled all the holes that I had to make in my drill press. In addition to that, the one thing you're going to want to try to be sure of when you get one is you want to make sure that when you have a drill press that the table, basically like this table here, you want to make sure that you have mounting holes on the table. The reason that's important is when you have a vise or something like this on the table, you want to make sure you can mount the vise to the table to keep the vise from moving. Now you'll notice that on this table here, you'll notice that this vise is adjustable. Now the one thing to keep in mind if you buy a vise like this, when I bought this vise years ago, this vise was actually almost, I paid almost $150 just for the vise alone. It's very important when you're working with the drill press especially if you're cutting metal, to have everything basically clamped on the drill press properly and in place, because what can happen is there's nothing worse than when you're drilling when you're drilling through a piece of metal and it comes loose and it flies around on your drill press table. That can cut you and cause a bad injury. So my advice is when you buy a drill press, make sure you can mount a drill press vise on top of that in addition. Now you're going to notice that also this vise is also removable, which means I can take it off and use it on another workbench if I need to. So basically, to sum up what I was saying about the drill press, you can figure probably on a drill press setup like I have here. If you get the drill press itself and you get the vise and depending on your spot, you can probably spend it anywhere from $300 to $700. Now you're going to find in your research. Now I'm basing these prices on the Sears Craftsman line of tools. You're going to find you can get tools like I used to use in high school, which is Delta and things like that. Now those are going to Delta and tools like that. Those are geared more towards professional builders. My workshop, I just basically build arcade machines. I don't really do anything professionally right now. If I did, I would probably go with the Delta line. Now, if you go with something like a Delta, you're talking minimum $1,000 and up for a Delta. So that's one of the things you want to consider is your budget when you start out for things like the drill press. Now, another thing that I highly recommend that you get in here is if you'll notice that these all the templates and things I have on the wall here, if you'll notice in these templates right here that basically I have holes and things. One of the things you want to keep in mind is when you buy when you're building arcade machines and things, if you notice on these panels here, you'll see I have holes and things cut into these. Now what I basically use to cut the holes and things is I use a scroll saw. I'm going to show you what that is. Okay? Now this is another piece of equipment that I've owned for quite a while. This is a Sears Craftsman 20-inch scroll saw. Okay. Now one of the things that's really nice about having a scroll saw is if you have to make intricate cuts and things, this is a piece of equipment that will allow you to do that. It has a large table on it, so you can move your piece around. And the other thing you want to keep in mind is also this table is also adjustable. It can go back and forth. Now, the thing to keep in mind about scroll saws is just like I told you, with the drill press you can mount it on a workbench. Well, you can do the same thing with the scroll saw. Now, you'll notice that my scroll saw basically is a floor model. It has a table and everything that goes along with it. It's a floor model. Now, when I bought my scroll saw, the one thing I wanted to keep in mind is one thing that's going to greatly affect the price of scroll saws is how much room you have on the arm that actually cuts the piece. What that means is it means the arm that's in the back of the scroll saw right here, right back here between the blade and back. This is known as the arm back here. The more room you have back here, the better off you are. The reason that's important is when you get a piece like this right here. When you're cutting, if you have more room back there, it will allow you to turn the piece easier without running into the back of the scroll saw. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind is a larger scroll saw usually will offer you more room as far as cutting clearances in the back, but it's also going to cost you more money. One of the things to keep in mind on mine is now I basically went with when I bought this, I went with a Sears. This is actually a Sears Craftsman Contractor Series. Now, if you go with the Contractor Series saw, it's going to up the price considerably. When I bought mine, and this is a while ago, I spent almost $500 on my scroll saw. It was actually quite a bit. It was actually it was more than I originally had intended on doing. But one of the things that came in mind is with all the benefits I've got of spending the extra money on the scroll saw, it's more than benefited me having the going ahead and spending the extra money that I needed. If you're basically going to go ahead and equip it with drill bits and things like that, one of the things that's nice about this too is it has a case and everything on the side here to be able to put your bits and everything in too. The one thing that I did mention to you about the drill press and everything too is, just like a drill press, you have to remember that when you have a drill press, you're going to have one of the things you want to do is you want to consider also that I didn't enter here is you want to consider getting all your drill bits and things like that. Now, I can tell you that on my drill bits alone for my shop right here, I probably spent about $200-300 just on drill bits alone. But the thing is, if you're going to, depending on the projects that can handle larger areas too, and things like that, varying in various sizes from small, going all the way up to large. And once again, that just depends on the type of things that you're working with. That's another thing. The budget you use for your drill bits and things like that, it's going to vary depending on the size of material that you're working with. Same thing is true with the scroll saw. You have to remember that the blades and things that you use for the scroll saw, I spent about $30-40 on those when I first got them, and they've lasted me a while because I don't use the scroll saw all the time, so it's lasted me for quite a while. The next piece of equipment I wanted to talk about is, now this is a piece of equipment that's optional. I basically have a floor grinder. That's what this is underneath this paper here. This is a bench grinder that I have. This basically allows me to do a number of things that I have to do involving grinding and things like that. Now I don't use the bench grinder that much, and I haven't had to use it very much. A bench grinder like this, if you're talking a floor model bench grinder, this probably will set you back. When I bought this, it was about $250 when I bought this. Now once again, now. This is a 6-inch one. Now, if you can get one that mounts on a workbench, it's going to probably be cheaper because you don't have all the metal and things that you need that goes down to the floor. That's one of the big costs that you have is all that metal that's required. As far as the grinding bits and everything go on, the stones and everything, my grinder basically came with all the wheels and things that I needed. Okay. Now, the next thing I was going to talk about is I was going to mention to you that one of the most important things I have in my workshop in here is my Craftsman table saw. Now, these table saws, this is probably going to be one of the most expensive items that you have in your workshop. Now, I'm going to show you that I have this is another Craftsman. This is another Craftsman Contractor Series. Okay, this is a 3-horsepower Contractor Series scroll saw. Now, one thing that's going to greatly affect the price of the scroll saw is the size table that you're going to have. If you spend a little bit more money on something like this, you're going to notice that I have a lot of room here. This table's pretty wide. You notice it goes all the way over here, and it's fairly wide. It covers a large area. Now, that's one of the things that's going to affect the prices. How much table area does your table saw have? That's going to vary greatly depending on how much space you have in your workshop. So scroll saws they vary in price greatly, but the thing to keep in mind is if you have a workbench, you can also mount a scroll saw on that. And one of the things that I really wanted to have that I wasn't able to is I really wanted to have a direct drive table saw. The Delta makes a really nice direct drive table saw that I was thinking about getting, but it was over $1,200, and that was years ago when I looked at getting one. So basically, when I bought this one here, I think I paid about $600 when I bought this one. Now that was about 20 years ago. They've gone up in price some, but when you do research on the internet, you're going to find something more or less like what I have that probably will meet most of your needs. Now the thing to keep in mind on these is when you buy a table saw, you also have to consider the fact that you also want to consider the blades and things that you use too. Now that's something else that's going to be a little extra. I spent about $60 on blades when I bought them for my table saw. I have regular cutting blades like these. This is just used for general cutting. But then I also have other blades that are used. I have blades like what are called dado blades. And those are basically blades that allow you, when you're cutting, you can cut wider channels and things in material. And those are called dado blades. Now I don't have a set of those in my workshop right now because I actually ended up giving those to one of my friends. That also set me back about another $50, $60. So you can figure on blades alone, you're going to spend about anywhere from $100 to $200, depending on the blade that you need. I suggest when you're getting a table saw that you get what's called a multi-purpose blade. You can use it for cross cutting, and you can also use it for cross cutting and use it for ripping as well. And that's one of the things to keep in mind when you buy a table saw is that you want to make sure you get one that meets your needs but isn't too much that you need. One of the other things I was going to suggest in my workshop, I don't use very often, I'm going to show you that I have a wood planer in here as well. Okay. Now this basically right here, as you can see in my shop here, I'm not going to show you everything that this has, but this is one of the pieces of equipment that I bought. This is actually a wood planer. This is basically used if you want to plane wooden things. That's what this is used for. You put your wood on here. Then you send it through here, and basically that allows you to plane your wood down. Now, when I bought this was about $300. Now, what I found is, I've actually found that, unfortunately, I really haven't had much need for the wood planer. I bought it because I figured that when I would have lumber, that I might have to get wood and stuff that I have to cut down. But what I've discovered is that with places like Home Depot and stuff like that now, the quality of wood and stuff that they offer now, really, most of the time, it's actually more cost efficient just to buy the wood that you need already finished and everything and at the right thickness. Places like Home Depot and stuff like now have almost made it a piece of equipment, at least for me, almost obsolete in my workshop. I haven't used this piece of equipment in probably 4 or 5 years at least. And the thing to keep in mind too is when you're setting up your workshop, the one thing you want to keep in mind too is you want to make sure you have a supply of wood. Now, when I build my arcade cabinets, basically the wooden stuff that I use to build the cabinets, I more or less only buy what I need to build the cabinets. Wood can be can be somewhat costly depending on the type of wood that you're buying. Now, if you notice the pieces that I have right here, like this piece of wood right here, one of the things that's going to determine how much it's going to cost you is the quality of the wood that you're buying. If you buy basically the thickness of the plywood that you have, thicker plywood is going to cost you more than thinner plywood. But the other thing to keep in mind is it's also going to be determined by the quality of the plywood. If you want plywood that's sanded more finer, that's going to cost you more money. I probably spend on my workshop alone on the arcade cabinets. I probably spend on each cabinet probably about maybe $70, $80 on lumber alone, just because I want to get lumber that doesn't have a lot of knots. I want to have a fairly nicely sanded finish. That way, when I go ahead and I apply paint and things like that, it makes it easier in the process. Okay. Now, in addition to that, you're also going to notice in here that I also have a scrap box down here too for scrap wood. This is one of the things you're going to want to do when you make a workshop. You're going to want to go ahead and try to have room in here so you can have scrap wood and things like that on the corner. And the reason that's important is if you can use your lumber efficiently like I do, you are still going to end up with some scrap wood, but you're going to find that scrap wood more often than not can be used for other things, such as if you have a small projects, things like that. Sometimes that scrap wood will come, you can do it just fine. If you just cut it down with the table saw, you end up using it, and that saves you a lot of money in the long run. So that's one of the things to keep in mind when you're setting up your wood area in your workshop. And the other thing I wanted to point out too, in one of my other videos, I pointed that in the basement that I also have a chop saw in the basement. Now, you can see one of my other videos to see what the chop saw looks like. When I bought my chop saw, I think I paid about $150. Now, fortunately, chop saws come in a wide range of sizes and things depending on what you need. I basically I just got a basic Sears one, and right now I just researched on the internet. You can get one more or less what I have right now for about $150. It more or less does the job that mine does in the basement. If you check out the basement, the other workshop video I have, you're going to be able to see what I call jaws down in my workshop. That's in my basement. I keep it down there because it's very noisy and I like to keep it down there. One of the other things I wanted to point out to you in the video is that we want to make sure when you have your workshop that you try to get yourself a really nice shop vac like I have here. You're going to find that the shop vac right here, this is one of the more handy things to have. Shop vacs vary in prices depending on the type that you want to get. There's a number that you can choose from, but a shop vac is always a good thing to have. When I bought mine, I think I spent about $60, $70 on it to get one. I got the Craftsman brand. You can also get shop vac and some of the other ones depending on the type that you need. Something else too you want to keep in mind when you're setting up your shop is I have a large, if you notice in one of those, I have a large range of bolts and things that are in here too. Now, the one thing you're going to find about hardware is not as cheap as it used to be. It's more expensive than it was. But you want to basically have, I basically have my toolbox organized into sections. You know, I have nuts and things for different size projects depending on what I'm working on. Now, this is basically just the nuts and things here. To basically set up a box like this, I probably spent about $150 probably for all these nuts and all these nuts and everything that are in here. Now that's just for the nuts and things like that. I also have a bolt box which is down here. Okay. Now down here you're going to see that I have a bolt box which is right here. Now this bolt box that I have there, I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay. Let me show you. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this bolt box that I have in here basically has a number of bolts and things that I need. Now, I basically have I probably have the stash of probably about 300 bolts in here. I think I spent probably on bolts alone probably about $100. But the thing you got to remember is I don't buy any more than I need to. I start a project out with basically what I need. Then I just buy what I need, whatever I need to do it. That way I'm not having excessive product and things along the way. And then one last thing I wanted to add on here is I want to mention that you also want to try to get yourself a really nice hand cart like this one right here. This basically I use if I have to move my arcade machines around. I have a really nice hand cart here, and this comes in really handy too. The last thing I was going to say in closing is that what I suggest you do also is that you also have an area in your workshop where you can set up steel and things like that, which is in this corner here. That will give you a really nice place for steel and all those other things that you need to store. As far as the total cost of the workshop goes, and I've been asked this several times, I would say probably my workshop when I set it up, if you count all the tools, all the tools I have in here, the wood I have in here, the bolts, the nuts, the bolts, I'd probably spend a neighbor about $2,000 to set everything up. It's going to vary depending on the equipment that you want. But this is just to give you a basic guideline of what it takes to actually set up a workshop of your own. The thing to keep in mind too with a workshop is one of the things I always stress about having a workshop is you want to make sure that you practice a lot of work safety in the workshop. Having a workshop, like I said before, is a really nice thing to have, but you definitely want to practice shop safety. So make sure that you read all those manuals and everything that come with your equipment to ensure you have a safe time in your workshop. I want to thank you again, by the way, for coming to my channel and visiting, and thank you again for taking in the tour of the workshop to basically tell you how to get started building a shop of your own. Take care, everybody.